Hey, here we are.
Mhm.
So today it's just me as the host, and we've got Lisa here again as our
Hello.
in-house astrologer. Angie is away, and Angie will be back next week. And we're going to talk about kind of an astrology basics. So let's dive into astrology, and we're going to answer all the questions someone could possibly have about getting started with astrology, or maybe not, whatever we can fit in the hour.
Right.
So how are you doing, Lisa?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Well, shall we dive in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so at, let me back up a little bit. I've only been interested in or kind of dabbling in or understanding astrology probably 3 or 4 years. I think actually my first birth chart reading was with you, and that would have been
Hmm.
probably 2 or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
roughly. Yeah. So prior to that, it was just kind of a big mystery. I remember reading horoscopes in the newspaper and being intrigued by them, and then reminded by the parental units that we don't believe in that stuff. So,
Of course. Well, let me
you
see. Were
know,
you raised Catholic or what?
uh, Christian and also very, very, very academic.
Oh,
Both
yeah.
parents had both parents had PhDs, so both religious and scientific background. And astrology did not fit in either one of those
No.
both those spots. So I guess one of the biggest questions someone might have when they're learning about astrology or approaching this the first time is going to be what exactly is astrology? Is it a belief system? Is it a science? Is it a language? Is it a religion? So let's go with that. What big picture? What is astrology?
Yeah. So I think of astrology as half science and half art form
Okay, cool.
and astrology actually predates astronomy by about 1300 years.
That is really
So,
interesting. So
mm,
the original Star Watcher people were astrologers, not
yeah.
necessarily, not necessarily documenting everything in just for the sake of science.
Yeah, exactly. So about 2,500 years ago, found like in the caves, they were marking the lunar cycle. So well before, we had the scientists or the
Yep.
science, if you will, and actually, they could see the night sky. Eclipses probably completely freaked them out because all of a sudden, you have the sun and the moon disappear.
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, so it's interesting to me because, astrologers are fine with astronomers, but there's a lot of astronomers that poo poo astrology. Like, well,
Right.
and
You
same with
know,
religion. I mean, all the popes used to have their own private astrologers. So, it's a little bit,
presidents too, actually. The number of our
mm,
country's presidents in the past had their
yeah,
own kind of go-to astrologer people, and I like that. That's kind of cool.
yeah. Ronald Reagan was a big one.
Yep.
Yeah. Nancy was really into astrology. So, so the reason why there is the scientific part of it in terms of so your birth chart is essentially comprised of the planets and then which astrological signs in the zodiac belt or the planets orbiting through at the time of your birth.
So a
And
birth
so,
chart, if we just back up a second and just say,
yeah.
what is a birth chart? The birth chart is where everything is, where all the planets are and moons and so on at
Mhm.
the time of your birth.
Yes, yes. So, in order to run a chart, you can run a chart on anything or anyone. You can
Mhm.
run it on an event or a person or a situation. You just need the date, the city, and the time is great if you can get that. But
Yep. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a funny thing. I had a friend who wanted to have his chart read, and I was going to forward him to you, and all he knew, I mean, he did not have his birth time, and was reluctant to tell me his city. So I'm like, well, we're not going to get much out of that then.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the data's fine. The latitude, longitude just helps to really hone in exactly where, everything was for you at that point. It's just not gonna, because if people give me inaccurate data, then it might not make sense to them because I'm just
Right,
gonna test
right,
a
because
chart based on the
it's
data.
wrong.
That's kind of the scientific part of it.
Yep.
And then,
So, on that point, most people know their sun sign, right?
yes,
That's all they know. And I think a lot of people are actually very surprised to realize that's not all there is, right? What
right.
else, what are the other two or three um, components to someone's, what are the other, what are the other signs that besides the sun sign, what are the other ones that are most important?
Yeah, so the sun represents kind of the core of who you are, how you
Yep.
run your whole chart. But oftentimes people but the other two main parts are the moon,
Yep.
the sign that the moon was transiting through at that time, and then the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth, which is
Okay.
why the latitude longitude is so important and the time is so important. And
Ah,
that would be, it's called your ascendant sign or your rising sign or your personality sign. And so let me back up. The moon is kind of your emotional nature, your emotional patterns, how you nurture, support yourself and others, and the lens through which you view your nurturing parent. And then the personality sign or ascendant is the mask that you show to the world. So when people first meet you, they're more likely going to pick up on that energy. And
oh,
then they see you get emotional, your moon sign is going to flare up. And then when they know you over a period of time, it's your sun sign.
okay.
So, and people might identify more with their moon sign or their personality sign than their sun sign. So that's why a lot of people will just kind of poo poo astrology, but they're only going by that one tiny aspect. I mean, it's a big
Right.
aspect, it's the sun, but they're just, if they don't
Right, but they
identify,
don't see like kind of the core of their own personality represented in that one sign.
right.
However, if they'd gotten a birth chart reading, they would have had all that stuff together and like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that does kind of describe me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And that's more where the art form comes in terms of, because there's so much you can add to a birth chart, not just the planets, you can add asteroids and dwarf planets and, just the kind of, there's a lot that you can read, in the chart, and each astrologer will kind of have their own little take on it. So I say you can
Right.
go to 5 astrologers in a day and they're all going to give you something more because your chart is just a layer upon layer upon layer of everything in
Oh,
everyone's
okay.
life.
So basically what would happen is all like if you visited five astrologers, you'd get the same sun sign, moon sign, rising sign, basic concepts. But then when you start digging a little deeper, everybody might highlight different things or see different things in that chart, correct?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
That's where the art comes in. I love that. So there's
Yeah.
wide open for interpretation, different parts of the chart.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a great way to explore yourself. Some people don't really focus on, they do more kind of trying to predict events or
Mhm.
situations. Like I have more of a psychological focus in my readings because I think it's a great tool to just keep understanding yourself and raising your vibration, setting yourself up to take best advantage of all the dates and transits that are going to head your way.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that. You know what? Actually, that's one of the questions I had. Um, how does someone who is digging into astrology use that to understand themselves better,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to change and transformation?
Yeah, exactly. So I always like to start with, kind of just going over a basic overview of the chart and then asking them, what life questions they have or what areas that aren't really flowing well for them. Because
Hmm.
there are 12 signs, but there's 6 polarities. So you can put energy back into order by kind of focusing on the opposite sign to kind of balance it out.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay, hang on a sec.
yeah,
12 signs, which we might list out in a minute, but the signs that are opposite each other are considered a polarity, like one particular polarity. Is that what you're saying?
yes, yes.
Hmm. I didn't know that. I just learned something. Everybody, I
Yeah.
just learned something today.
Yeah, so the polarities become really important because each polarity is going to represent more of a different aspect of your life. Like the Aries Libra is more about relationships, whereas Taurus Scorpio would be more about money and resources.
Mm.
Gemini and Sag is more about ideas and teaching, learning.
That's where I live.
Yeah, exactly. So, and so and then Cancer Capricorn, more about balancing your home needs with your work needs. And then the Virgo Pisces is more about the healing access, practical versus more metaphysical or energy healer. So,
Got it.
yeah.
Mm. You know what? I think I need another reading pretty soon. I'm ready to go a little deeper. So, all
Yeah.
right, all right. Let's tuck that away for our next time together. Another question that I have is, so one of the things that I've noticed about astrology is the cycles
Yes.
and cycles and patterns and things kind of it comes around again, it comes around again. So, funny story. When I first learned about the Saturn return, which I'll have you explain a little bit, what I learned about is that when your Saturn returns, that usually indicates something new happening in your life or like a life change. And when I went back to find that, it had already passed by like 10 years when I found out about it. And I look back at that time in my life, I'm like, oh my goodness, that was complete and total, change and almost some disruption around the
Hmm.
Saturn return. So tell me about the Saturn return
Hmm.
and what that actually means, and then what it means for cycles and change.
Yeah. So Saturn is, before they discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the outer planets we call them, Saturn was kind of it in terms of the end of time and space,
The
if you
solar
will.
system, yeah, yep,
Yeah, exactly. So, and each of the planets, we're going to call the sun and the moon are luminaries, but we're going to call them planets for this. But they each have their own um, cycle in terms
mhm,
of how long it takes for them to return back to where they were at the time of your birth.
okay,
So we were talking about before, and we started the show, the solar return. The sun returns around your birthday.
yep, that's the solar return. Like, oh,
That's the solar return. The moon goes through the chart, once a month.
once a month, yep,
Saturn takes anywhere from 28 to 30 years typically, to the point where it's going to exactly come back to where it was, the same degree and minute that as it was at the time of your birth.
okay. And
And
just real quick,
yeah,
that you said it takes 28 to 30 years. So in a person's lifetime, that for an average person, you're going to have two Saturn returns,
yeah,
possibly three if someone
possibly
really,
three.
possibly three.
Yeah.
But every one of those is going to be a time of potential life transformation. Yes.
Yes, exactly. The thought is that at your first Saturn return, you're kind of officially ending your childhood and you're
Yep,
needing to step into your adulthood in a new and empowered way. So, and it doesn't, people will say, is that good or bad? And I say, it doesn't have,
it
it's not
is.
that it's good or bad. It's just that it is. So you kind of look at what was going on around that time. So oftentimes people they could have a change in their job. They might get married. They might get divorced. They might have a baby. They might buy a home. I think the more that you are consciously living your life isn't as disrupted by the Saturn return
Yeah, good point.
because you don't have to get kind of course corrected. I mean, Saturn gets tagged as like the karmic teacher, if you will, learn your
Mhm.
lessons. And I don't know if it's that so much. It's just it's a good marker for that, in terms of needing to just, you know, step it up a little bit, maybe more in your life.
Mm,
And so, um, so that's kind of the first Saturn return.
okay.
And then it's really when somebody has their second Saturn return, which would happen anywhere from, 58 to 60
Yeah,
typically.
yeah. I'm looking at it pretty coming up pretty quick actually.
Yeah, exactly. I just went through mine. So it's good to go back and take a look at what happened during your first Saturn return, because sometimes the cycles will give you an indication of what you might be dealing with the second time around as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get to the second Saturn return, it's more about legacy in a sense of like, what are
Oh,
you really, oftentimes people will be like, okay, like maybe 2/3 of my life is over and I really want to step into it. I want to do my purpose and what
boy,
legacy.
that really resonates.
Yeah, right, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's I was gonna say it's kind of a point in my life that I'm like, I am done with nonsense. I don't want to be doing like mundane, pointless things in any kind of line of work. I really want to do something that's meaningful and something that I want to do, not something I'm going to kind of suck it up and have to do because I don't have any choice.
yeah, exactly. So Saturn rules authority. And so the more you are your own authority in your own life, the more that it's going to flow easier for you. So if you
Mhm.
get to the second Saturn return and you've been living your life for everybody else, all of a sudden you're like, nope, now
Nope, not anymore.
it's
Done with
not
that.
anymore. It's going to be a good marker. Yeah. Hmm.
Cool. Boy, I can hardly wait.
Yeah.
Um, um, so why don't we do this now? There's a lot of interesting vocabulary um, in astrology, and why don't we take a few words and concepts in astrology and maybe explain them.
Sure.
We already did birth chart. That was one on my list of terms that need to be explained. Um, how about the word zodiac?
Yeah. So zodiac refers to the constellation belt
Okay,
that the constellation star clusters.
right. And there's how many in the zodiac?
Well, in the zodiac that we use, 12.
12. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So,
another good question. You
mhm.
said the one that we use. There are different systems out there, correct? How
Yes.
many systems?
Yeah.
Are there
I
like
don't,
dozens or just a few?
I don't know the answer to
Okay.
that.
But you
Yeah.
use
I,
typically one that's used pretty much
in the
in
way.
Europe and the US, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because I know there's other ones. There's some Middle Eastern ones, and I know there's a Chinese one as well. So
Yeah. So it's more of in the Western
okay,
hemisphere, I
right,
guess, how I would how I
yep.
would say.
So let's talk about the signs, like the major signs.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. I got a list of them here. At least I think I did. No, I have a list of the planets. So the 12 signs. Do you have you know them by heart, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I want to go back to what the birth chart is for a minute because
Sure.
this is going to help us out. So the birth chart is a wheel
Yep.
and it's comprised of 360 degrees.
Right. As
Like,
circles are known to be.
yeah, right. Never more, never less. And that's divided up by the 12 astrological signs, 30 degrees each.
Yep.
So we get the 30 times 12 is 360. And in the natural wheel, at the ascendant, which is when you look at a birth chart, it's going to be off to the left hand side.
That's what's happening in the easternmost part of the chart.
Yeah, it was the sign rising on the eastern horizon at the time of your birth, if of the chart.
Yep.
And so then the signs go counterclockwise,
Hmm.
and they start with Aries. So it's always Aries, and then followed by Taurus, followed by Gemini, and then Cancer, and then Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces.
Awesome. Um, and each one of those is both a constellation but tell us how that relates to the word house. What is a house?
Yeah, okay. So the houses, so I'm gonna, so if you think about the houses are the life areas
Okay,
or the classrooms. And the houses, so in astrology, you can use a number of different house systems.
okay.
I use the Placidus house system, which
Oh,
is
okay.
more,
Interesting.
yeah. Some people do equal house or whole sign, where you would have each house would correlate to an astrological sign, not necessarily starting with Aries, but there would only be 30 degrees in each house. But mine is Placidus is more based on that's where the latitude longitude can come
Okay.
in, and so you don't with Placidus you might not have 30 degrees in each house.
So the houses might be different sizes? Is that
Yes, they might be different sizes. And you might have more, you could have up to three signs in a
in a
house.
house?
Yeah, but it's always based on the degrees. Each of the signs are still going to only have 30 degrees in them.
Okay. Interesting. And this was news to me when I got my first reading. Each house covers or deals with a different aspect of your life, right? So give me some
Yeah.
examples of the different houses and what aspects of life they cover.
Okay. So everything in astrology is flip flopped and reversed. So it's like literally holding up a mirror to you. So the bottom six houses are actually called the northern part of your chart, and they're the
Um,
subjective part of the chart. So the first house is the most personal house in the chart. It has to do with your physical body, your personality, how you present yourself to the world. It's like the most me oriented
hmm,
house. It's the
okay,
natural house of Aries and Mars.
okay,
So no matter, and this is where you get all these layers and reading the energy, is because no matter what you have in that first house, you're going to have a little bit of energy of Aries and Mars too,
okay,
because that's its natural position.
okay.
And then we go, second house is my money, my resources, my value system, safety, all of that. Third house, it has to do with your mind,
Hmm,
think and process information. It also has to do with your local community and siblings. Um, and then we get to the fourth house, which is the foundation of the chart. It's home and family, both
okay.
of your origin and then the
Yep.
family you might create, um, and your physical home,
Hmm.
um, family patterns, things like that.
Okay.
Fifth house has to do with love, self love, love in general,
Hmm.
dating, if you're dating,
Okay.
gambling, risk taking,
Hmm.
and also children,
Hmm.
specifically the firstborn child, if you have children.
Okay.
And then the sixth house has to do with the client or the individual's work, how they are of service in the world, health conditions, daily habits,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
then so those are mostly like the personal areas of your life.
Yep.
And then when we go into the top part of the chart, that's more out in the world.
Oh, so half the chart, the houses are about me
Yes.
and how I relate maybe to others, and then the
Hmm.
other houses are how I present to the world.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So if you have most of your planets below the horizon or the in the northern part of the chart, you're going to be more
Mhm.
of an introvert.
Oh, interesting. I am just dying to go back and look at my chart.
Right. And if you have most of the planets above the horizon, things happen to you in the outer world, you're more of an extrovert.
Okay. And evenly split, you're probably
Yeah,
comfortable
more
and
balanced.
balanced.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some people, I met somebody once, they had like, and especially if you have like, say, 9 out of 10 planets above the horizon, even though you are, um, more of an extrovert, things happen to you out in the world, your internal processing is all going to go through that one planet. So that
Oh,
becomes
wow. So
significant.
that comes a, when you see that as when you're reading someone's chart, you will pay special attention to that one
Yeah,
planet. That's
yeah,
a little bit
exactly. Yeah,
so,
that becomes really important. Same thing with the east west.
okay.
Because that again that's flip flops. If you have most of the planets on the left side of your chart, it's more the eastern, and then you're more in control of your life and how you want to accomplish. You don't really need people as much to accomplish what you are here to do.
Okay.
And if most of that are on the right side, you really need those partnerships to really kind of whatever you came here to learn to do. You need other people more if you have, you know, planets
Wow.
on the side. So
I'm
all of it becomes really important. And then when you
yeah,
answer questions, you have to kind of follow the energy around. And
right. Right.
yeah,
Wow, this is just really interesting. Again, that I did not know. I think you probably mentioned that, but it didn't really sink in, and now it did. I'm like,
yeah,
I need to
there's
go
a
back
lot.
and
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than it's
sure, and it's as deep as you could. I mean, you can just keep going deeper and deeper, and
the rabbit hole.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's
Mhm.
a good thing, right? There's endless more to learn.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a good thing. It's just it just helps you really get deeper and deeper into who you are, and understanding yourself
Yeah.
and the others in your life, because you can compare your chart to another person's chart and see, where the connections are.
Yep. That brings another vocabulary term. There, it's like it's not synergy, but it's sin or something. Where you
Synastry.
synastry. Yes,
Yeah.
that's where you take two charts and you kind of see how the people interact.
Yes.
Correct? Tell me
Yep.
about that. Tell me about
Two or
synastry
two or more. You
or
can even
more. Okay.
more. So you could take, if you have there's a family of four, you could take all the charts and look at them all together. So what you do is the you can do bi-wheels, tri-wheels, quadri-wheels, where you take the charts and just layer them on top of each other.
Mhm.
And that's where especially if you have if the degrees line up.
Okay.
So if somebody, it has, uh, if like say your mother's sun sign falls on your personality sign, there's more of a deeper connection there, like a more of a one to one, and
Oh,
she's
interesting.
going to be much more significant to that child because like her energy is going to be sitting on top of the personality of the child,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So the signs become important, but then if you can even narrow it down more to like where do the degrees connect? Same thing like my daughter and I, our Saturns square each other.
Okay. There's a term square. What does that mean?
Yeah. So okay. So whereas when something sits on top of each other, it's called a conjunction. So in the square, so there are aspects. They're called
Okay.
aspects. They're
And
planetary conversations.
aspects are like shapes, right? Shapes of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they're essentially how far apart one planet is from another
Okay. All
in
right.
terms of degrees
Okay.
within a certain allowable orb, we call it. And so when you have two planets square each other, squares really propel you into action. You can get a lot accomplished with a square, but it might cause some conflict. And when you have
Okay.
Saturn square Saturn, we're both right. Like I would get in a knockdown, drag out fight about what she's wearing to, preschool. And my astrologer was like, pointed it out to me. She's like, well, your Saturn square each other. So she's going to win every fight with you. You have to like
That's
pick and
hilarious.
choose your battles, give her as much authority. And I did. And it changed everything. We get along really great because I let her do her thing, because she likes to be her own boss. And I'm like, perfect. I do too. I'm a Capricorn.
So
So
that actually is one of my questions, which is how do we use astrology to make good decisions, or
yeah.
let's see how I phrased it. Um, yeah, how does someone understand themselves,
Hmm.
and especially that you just mentioned with relationship to another person? And the example you just gave is like, well, when I realized my Saturn was conjunct with hers, did I use that
Square.
word right?
It was
Square,
square.
square with hers.
More of a conflict.
Yes, meaning you you are going to be in conflict. And what you did from that is you said, okay, I'm not going to let that conflict rule us. I'm going to let her be her thing. And so the
Yeah.
astrology actually helped you make a good decision.
Yes. It actually set up our whole relationship
That's
because,
that's fantastic.
yeah, because I mean, she can't run in the street. She's got to brush her teeth. Like, there's a few rules, right?
Right,
But
some ground rules.
some ground rules. But what does she wear to preschool? That leave that up to her, and then you don't fight about it. And because the thing about it is, especially with the parent-child dynamic, that's all the child has to do is just to win that battle all day. Lost the parent. So but you can have these really interesting dynamics, and once you know that about it, then you can say, okay, well, I'll work with that.
Mhm.
And
At first, and then
do I
you
want to
can
be
make
right or
good
do I want to?
decisions.
Yeah. Sorry.
Wow, I love that. Um, so some other terms that I see come up a lot. Let's see. There are some shapes or some aspects. Trine and
Yeah.
then yod.
Yes.
Are
Okay.
those two different? Those are two different shapes, right?
Yeah, so a trine means that roughly they're 120 degrees apart from each other. It's more
Mm,
of a luck aspect.
hmm.
It's really more about the energy of Jupiter. Like, you just feel like good luck is coming, right? But it
So
can make you a little bit, you could procrastinate or be a little bit lazy because you might just feel like, oh, it's just going to work out. So I always say, if you have a trine and you put energy into it and you take action, then you can really grow and expand it.
mm, okay, let's look for trines on my chart when we talk next.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there's, conjunction squares and oppositions. Well, because I draw the lines on the chart just to show everybody, like, it's like kind of your own unique mandala pattern, if you will.
Oh,
Those are the more, you need those. You can accomplish a lot with them, but they might come with a little bit more conflict.
mhm,
And then the sextile, which is 60 degrees, and the trine 120, they're in blue because there's just an easier flow, but you have to still then add energy to it to make it really go into motion.
okay.
And then an inconjunct is 150 degrees
Mm,
apart from each other. It's a frustration aspect. I always say it's like you're in a tent camping and you're about to go to sleep and there's a mosquito buzz starts buzzing by your ear. You can't find it. And so you just, like, it'll frustrate the hell out of you, but it won't kill you.
yep,
Right? Unless,
interesting.
well, yeah.
Let's
So,
look, let's look for a few of those for me too.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when you have a yod pattern, so sometimes you have three or more points
Yep.
in communication with each other, and we call them complex patterns. So
Okay.
the yod or pattern is really interesting because it's it's can be involved in health conditions. So it's a because it could be a health aspect. I find when people come to see me, it's more about, like, a destined life purpose kind
Mm,
of pattern. I always use the example of Michelangelo, the finger of man meets the finger of God.
mm,
Because if you have a yod pattern, it's thought that you come in more with a divine purpose to unfold.
okay.
If you
Yeah.
if you stray from it, you get course corrected. I always say it's like, when you teach kids to bowl, you put up the bumper guards so they don't get the gutter balls.
Right.
So people that have a yod pattern, and I have one of those, it's just you feel like at certain times things are meant to be and they kind of shift your life direction. And if you go with it, then you're more in flow with what your life purpose was, or maybe the reason why you chose to have this experience.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned another thing too. I think we mentioned this already. Transit.
Yeah.
What is a transit?
Okay. So a transit is okay, so your birth chart is kind of you it's like we took a picture of where the planets were going through the constellation belt. We froze it on a sheet of paper. It
Right.
never changed your whole
It's a
life.
snapshot in time.
The snapshot in time, exactly. It's a transit chart because that's where those energies were at that moment in that place. But then everything, the planets are always moving at different speeds.
Yep.
So a transit is when we take the collective energy and we we superimpose it over the birth chart, and
Okay.
it's when the degrees line up in a conversation.
So would that be taking a different date and lining it up with the birth chart?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I took birth chart and then I took today,
Mhm.
we could overlay them
Yes.
and you would see transits, which means this planet was here at birth, but now it's over there, right?
Correct.
Is that a transit?
In relation to your chart. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Very
your
cool.
birth chart is essentially a transit chart because it describes the energy of where the planets were. But then there are dates and times when the collective energies are going to activate or spark your chart in a number of
Okay.
different ways. And so, one of the really fun uses of astrology is to go back to a significant date in your life and just look at what was the energy going
Mm,
on that day and how did it interact with your chart.
okay. And I have a big question now about going the other direction. Going forward,
Yep.
you can also look up how things are going to line up next month, next year, in 10
Mhm.
years, correct?
Yes.
So how does that help you help the client make some decisions?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where because I like the sessions to be really relevant to what they want to know. So I'll just
Sure.
say, what are your questions? So sometimes they will ask about a work question, for example, right? So Saturn and Mars are the work planets. So I'll always take a look at first, where is Saturn, where is Mars, and wherever Saturn is in your chart is an area where you're restructuring something.
Okay.
And wherever Mars is where you want to be taking your action. But then there's this planet Uranus that's usually event producing. So I always take a look at where Uranus is because, and it always retrogrades, or most always retrogrades. So it's going to hit a point 3 times. And those dates are going to be connected by the energy of something. And the first pass, you're going to understand what you're dealing with. Like, this is what's presenting itself. The retrograde is going to be a review of that. And then the third pass is going to be the answer or resolution.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
And it's
And just
usually, yeah, and usually, if I ask those dates, it's people will be like, oh my God, that on that date this happened. They can usually point to something there.
identify it. Yeah.
But it's something they're really struggling with inside or maybe wrestling with or want to expand on the inside, and it just shows it connects with how is it expressing in the outer world.
So just a funny example, if you saw that next month on the 15th, Mars, Uranus, and Saturn were all in the what's the money house?
Oh, the second house,
All in the second
your
house?
money, but eighth house is joint monies, so monies you have with another person,
But you
partnership,
would see
or
that as like, whoa, something big's going to happen with money
yeah.
the middle of next month.
Yeah.
So,
So I typically forecast out about a year,
okay.
for the big,
Um,
I'll just have that all handy and just use it as I need to in the session.
all right. And you're not looking at each day, day by day. You have another tool that kind of highlights where things are
Yeah.
making significant
Yeah.
changes.
My computer software will just kind of do the major ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, and you can look at, so there's faster moving planets and then slower moving planets because the moon is more of a trigger for an event
Okay.
because it moves so quickly. It goes through your whole chart once a month.
Yep.
Whereas Pluto is 240 years to go all the way through. So
Most of that us don't need to worry about that one.
no, the US though is going through its first Pluto return.
Oh,
So
really? Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
and that's
Well,
significant because it dredges up everything that you haven't dealt with.
yeah. On
And
that note,
it right
moving
on
right
Cloud
along,
Street.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would be like, oh no, she's getting in politics.
No, but seriously, I think everyone can see, oh, that would
Yeah,
explain astrologically why
yeah,
we're in some turmoil. Yep.
Exactly, because people would say who's going to win the election, and I'm like, it doesn't really matter. The U.S. is going through turmoil, no matter who gets in there. So yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. So let's see. There's another aspect of this. I know, you know what? I think we'll have to leave it. I think we'll have to leave it. I wanted to ask about the elements, right? The fire, earth, air, and
oh
water,
yeah, Mhm.
because I know those have each affecting the different constellations. But
Yes,
I think we're going to leave that because we're pretty much at time. I do have
okay,
one kind of final question,
yeah,
and that's to kind of wrap it all up. Um, and that is so if someone is curious but maybe skeptical about astrology in general, what would you say would be the next step for someone to like kind of learn a little bit more, dig in a little bit more? What would be a next step for someone interested in this?
yeah. I think sitting down with an astrologer that can kind of go over the aspects of their life,
Yeah,
because
that's true. You know what? Actually, for me, when you and I, when I had my first reading, I was like,
yeah,
wow, this is really interesting. And then going back to review it or going back and seeing, something else about astrology and looking at it again, made it even more interesting. So to your point, sitting
yeah,
down with an astrologer for that basic birth chart
yeah,
reading
yeah.
would be great.
And I think too, especially because if you can read, there's so much online that you could
Yeah. Yep.
explore in your chart, but that isn't really putting it all together. If you just look at everything separately, it doesn't synthesize it. That's the beauty of going to an astrologer that can read the energy all together
Right. Right.
and
You know,
interact with how you're using the energy, and it might make a lot more sense because
yes. What I
it
found with the books is the books that I have on astrology are really good at explaining, this is what a trine is, this is what a yoga pattern is, and,
yeah,
and they're very good at the academic the vocabulary, which is why we had a little bit of that in here. But I
yeah,
think what an astrologer is going to help do is what is more of the bigger concept. Like this means this is how you're going to interact with other people,
yeah,
and that's both a place where they can learn something, but also um, an opportunity for making a change in their lives.
yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Any final thoughts or recommendations? Put you on the
um
spot.
I know, right? Let me see.
Maybe if nothing more, we'll put your contact information in the
Okay,
show notes so that if people are interested in
sure.
getting an initial or any kind of reading, even if you've gone to astrologers, see Lisa anyway.
Yeah,
And
I just did a trade with an astrologer the other day, and they pointed out things I didn't even see in the chart before. So, I mean, you just can keep exploring your chart, throughout the course of your life. It's
that's really cool.
so much more than the sun sign.
Yeah, and like we started out with, people that only know their sun sign are basically seeing a tiny little sliver of what's possible.
Right, exactly.
Cool. Well, let's wrap it up. Lisa, thank you so much for being our guide here for
Thank you,
learning
Jen.
astrology and for being so helpful in kind of kicking us off in this great new adventure.
Thank you so much. It's been great this 4 weeks now, like a whole month with you guys.
I know it's exciting. All right, thanks everyone.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Okay, bye bye.